Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out those 14mm bolts in the back that we talked about. Hold on to those bolts because you're going to need to replace them later on. And you just take the caliper off. But we don't leave it hanging. What you're going to do is you're going to support it with a hanger. Just hook it through here and just relocate it up and out of the way so that it doesn't interfere with what you're working on. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take out those bolts in the back that we talked about. I think they're like 17mm. Yep, they are. Those are a little bit tighter, and this is a little bit rusty, this vehicle. So let's take these out. And we're just going to take that mounting bracket off of the car and relocate that to the side for now. And we just take the rotor off the car. And we're going to remove this cotter pin, and we're going to remove that nut right there. Use a pair of cutting pliers to remove that, or any kind of pliers that you have. Sometimes these are pretty rusty, so it's a little bit difficult to get out. And what you do is you grab the cotter pin with the pliers, and you just pull down with it. And use leverage to remove it. And we're also going to need to reuse that lock that's on here now, so just take that off and just relocate that to the side. As far as removing this nut here, I'm going to use an air gun. Okay. And we just push it in to make sure that the axle is nice and free, which it is. We're going to use that nut over again too. Then we're going to come over here and we're going to take out this bolt that holds the tie rod end right in here. You just take that cotter pin out. Just straighten it out. And you can grab it and just pull it right out. Is the way we're going to separate this this tie rod end right here is we're going to hit the end of the knuckle right here where the tie rod goes into it. You're just going to hit it a couple of times and it should pop up. You got to hit it pretty firmly though. You see how it pops up? And it gets it right out. Next thing we're going to do is down on the bottom here. We're going to remove these bolts on the bottom. I'm going to show you. Down underneath the bottom right here by the ball joint. We're going to remove these bolts right here that actually hold the ball joint to the lower control arm. We're going to take these bolts out right here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top of the strut right here and we're going to remove these two bolts right here. And that should give us the knuckle, should come right off the car. Okay, and what you're going to do is you're going to just hold the back bolt with a wrench. It's probably going to be an 18mm. Okay, and you just hold this bolt and you take it off with the air gun in the front. Same thing on the bottom one. Okay, that loosens up our upper part that connects onto the lower part of the strut. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take out those 3 bolts underneath the bottom by the ball joint. Again, if you have air, use the air. If not, you can do it by hand. Okay, now we got it all loosened up. We can remove it from the car. Just push the axle through, and you just rock it, and you can pull it right out. And then this just lifts right up and out, and you're all set. We'll see. You can hear that sounds pretty bad. So let's get it over to the bench and let's crush this bearing out, and we'll get started. It's going to be a little difficult for me to film this and tell you exactly how to do it at the same time. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to press this bearing out, and I'm going to press the new one back in. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to press the center piece out. We're going to put a piece of an adapter here, and we're going to push the other bearing out. So let me get that part done, and I'll come back and I'll show you how to put it back together. Okay, sorry about not being able to show you how to do that, but basically what happens is when you press that center piece out, it does come apart in numerous pieces. And this bearing here, once I pulled it apart, I could look inside and see that the inside here was all eaten up. I know it's a little hard to see in the dark, but it was eaten up pretty well. So now I got the new bearing pressed in there. We put the piece back on through the back here for the seal, and we're going to wrap it up now. So let's get back over to the car and put the job back together. What we're going to do is we're just going to slide the axle back in here where it belongs, and then we're just going to put the lower part of the ball joint back into the bottom, and then we're going to catch the nuts onto the bottom without tightening everything up. Just catch them on there by hand for now. You're going to get everything caught before you tighten it up. And then get our last part in there. All by hand. And we're going to put our strut back through, and we're going to reinstall the bolts in the locations that they came out. Everything is just done by hand right now. Once you've got everything caught by hand, we can tighten everything up. Now remember, if you're doing it by hand, you can do it by hand. I'm going to use an air gun. We'll tighten up the bottom bolts first. And then we'll tighten up the top bolts. The alignment does have to be reset on this vehicle, so we're just going to push it in a little bit. After you've got that tightened on, we're going to reinstall our nut onto the axle, and we'll shoot that nice and tight. Just so you know, there is torque specs on this bolt here, so we are going to come back to it once we finish the rest of the job putting it together, and at that point then we'll torque the nut down to the proper foot-pounds. Reinstall our lock ring. That secures it so it won't turn and come out. Make sure you put your cotter pin in. We're going to grab a new cotter pin. through. And then we can bend it over and tighten it up. And we can reinstall our tie rod end. Again, everything by hand. Tighten that up. Again, put a new cotter pin back through here and lock it down. And we can put our rotor back onto the car. Put our rotor back on, and then we're going to reattach our mounting bracket for the caliper. We're just going to lay it in here, grab the bolts that we previously took out, and screw them back in. Screw both top and bottom in before you tighten anything up. And then once you have them tightened up by hand, you can tighten them in with the ratchet. Make these very snug. I'm just going to check them one more time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our caliper and reattach our caliper. Slide the caliper back onto its position. Then we can reattach the two bolts that we previously took out, the 14 millimeters. Nice and tight. Same thing on the upper one. Tighten it down as far as you can by hand. And then you tighten up the top bolt. Alright, so that's it. Let me just recap everything we've done so you have an idea. Alright, we put the top bolts back through the strut and we tightened those up. We tightened up the 3 bolts on the bottom of the ball joint here. We tightened up our axle through the hub bearing. We put our lock clip lock on here, put a cotter pin through it. We installed the tie rod end, tightened it up, and also put the cotter pin back through. We put our mounting bracket on, tightened up the 17 millimeter bolts, reattached our caliper, and tightened up the 2 14 millimeter bolts to hold the caliper in place. And that's it, we're all set. Next thing we're going to do, put the wheel on, and we're going to take it out, get the wheel alignment reset on it, and we'll wrap this job up. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.